Welcome to Outreach Programming. I'm Mary Gerasi, and I have three guests from the Traditional Past Future Journeys art exhibit at the Ybor campus at HCC. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's Native American History Month. Thank you for being here. We're trying to expand our horizons and honor the Native American culture and artists in our community, so I appreciate you being here on the show. I'd like to introduce Doug Coffin, who is a sculptor and painter, who also will be at the HCC exhibit. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you.
And George Howard, photographer as well. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And Dan Lomahaftewa. Haftewa. I'm sorry for that one. And he's a painter.
Thank you.
Let's get started. We'll start with Doug. Tell me about your sculpting and painting. How long have you been doing it? And what has been your impetus for your work?
I've been a painter and artist for 40 years, a full-time one for 20 years. And 25 years ago in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I live, I started a series of contemporary outdoor totem pieces out of steel, and they range from 12 to 40 feet tall. And I've done them in Africa, Italy. They're from Boston to Seattle in this country. But contemporary pieces inspired by native elements, artifacts, things like that. I grew up at an Indian boarding school in Lawrence, Kansas, where my father was a coach, and so I was surrounded by Indians from all over the country when I was a kid. And so as I got it into the world of art, that was my inspiration.
When you were in boarding school, what came about in that native culture to you that inspired you? Was it people talking about their heritage, their language, bringing things to the school to talk about? I mean, how were you exposed to the native culture at the boarding school?
Well, a lot of the Indians had never been off the reservation before until this time. And I was the paper boy there on the campus, so I'd get to meet a lot of them. And just the one thing that tied them all together is they all had a good sense of humor, it seemed like. And that was a big connection.
I've noticed.
But then they were just trying to survive, you know, and the government, you know, and this was in the 50s, so the attitudes were a lot different than they are today. And but just seeing the survival element, adaptation to new environments and trying to make their lives better however they could, you know, through education, but just supporting each other also.
So how did these people's lives and maybe their stories and what they shared with you bleed over into your artwork?
I started studying artifact books, and I was inspired by totem poles from the Northwest, shields, warrior shields, medicine shields, and the bone breastplates that the warriors had in the plains area. And those are strong images to me, and kind of protection, magic, things like that, the intent. And so that was the inspiration. I just changed the scale, changed the materials, and I've continued doing that for 25 years.
Can you please explain what a totem pole is and what the word totem means to the native culture and how the totem pole actually works and what its idea is?
Yeah, I think most people have some image in their head about that, but typically they were from the Northwest, you know, maybe 100 feet tall, and they were the different animals that were their spiritual connection, their totems. I mean, they told a story. If you knew how to interpret the positioning of the animals, the arrangement of them, and a lot of times they were outside the house as kind of welcoming and protection elements there. And the people of that culture, if they didn't know who was behind the house but looked at their totem, could probably understand who that person was inside. And so that's a, you know, powerful, beautiful element. And that was, and I thought, well, they don't exist in any other place, but I'm an artist, so I can make them where and when and how I want to as a statement inspired by that.
So the creatures in your totems or the figures in your totems, where do they come from?
Well, I use geometric elements, kind of triangles that aren't complete, circles, different things, and these geometric forms have kind of a pretty strong presence, and I use numerical kind of symbolism, past, present, future things, and with the different cross symbols. And if I had a piece and they're on display in the painting form at the show at the Hillsborough,
Right.
and you can see a lot of things there that probably tell you something, but unless you know how to read them or have an interpreter, you can't figure out exactly. But I think people get a sense that a story is being told.
Isn't most symbolism indigenous to almost all cultures? There's some kind of almost subconscious relationship to the organization of symbols. And I think whether it's a circle or a square or a triangle, I think human beings are very drawn to making some sense out of it, like a new millennium totem. I mean, it can speak to people on levels we're not even aware of.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've traveled around the world, different places, and I either study it or they've seen my work there, and they relate to it from their own meanings. And I do a lot of sun and moon inspired elements, and sun represents male energy, female is the moon. But in Germany, places like that, it's just the opposite, how they see it. But I mean, still, it means something. And a lot of the work deals with sun, moon, which is male, female energy in the cosmos. And I use a handprint in a lot of my works. And it's kind of mankind seeking enlightenment, from the truth of the universe.
Some of the earliest cave drawings found were of hands, where they had put paint in their mouth and blew out small, almost early airbrushing of their own hands, sort of like, here I am, this is where I am.
Yeah, exactly.
The hand in India as well as a spiritual amulet, and on and on. So, yeah. I'm going to move over to George for a moment, and we'll get back with you. Welcome, George.
Thank you.
Tell me about your photography.
Well, I was taught basically to understand light and how it falls from my mentor. So when I attend the powwows, I concentrate mainly on the regalia, the craftsmanship in it, but I like for it to have some type of energy that you can see and feel from my images, whether it's a portrait of San Carlos Apache, which is one of the pieces that's
It's
at
a beautiful
the college.
photograph. I saw that.
Thank you. It will tell a story basically looking at it, getting some emotion out of the images artistically is what I try and approach.
Why natives? Why have you?
Well, my heritage is my grandmother's half Cherokee, so I'm Afro-American and Cherokee. And for me, it's just more of a pursuit of my heritage, contribution also in documentation of a dying, event that, the first Americans, it's traditional. You don't see as much as actually you should see. So if I can have any type of contribution into preserving that, I feel privileged in doing it.
So it sounds to me like your work is working on many levels. It's historic documentation, it's artistic documentation, and maybe a little spiritual coming from your quest for your own identity, possibly.
Correct. As well as artistically, I like to go with a lot of lines and for instance, like I'll shoot the back of a bonnet and I'll fill the whole the screen up with it, and you'll see like the lines from the feathers, the beads, and everything, the craftsmanship, and showing it as an official piece of art, not just, the object itself.
I think a lot of times arts and crafts in general get overlooked, basically because they were made by women and they were not considered art, such as quilting, beading work, women's work, which is now the crafts movement, and it's becoming honored as an art form. So it sounds like you were way ahead of honoring that art form in your own way.
Yeah, it's important for people to see that because, in a sense, when you're at a powwow, there's a circle basically where the dancers are. So people are far away, so they don't really get a chance to appreciate the craftsmanship up close. So what I usually do is try and bring those images up close, so when people do view them, they can appreciate what's gone into the work and the regalia.
The beading work to me is extraordinary. What they do with those teeny tiny beads, thousands of them for breastplates, belts,
Right.
on regalia.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite craft that you enjoy shooting or bringing light to? Minutia, larger objects, or all of it?
All of it, but I concentrate a lot on the bustles because there's two types of fancy dancers, and that's mainly what I shoot, and that's the plains and the northern. The northern uses buckskin and fur, and the plains is mainly feathers and beads. There are some beads as well in the northern, but I like to basically zero on the feathers in the bustles because they do reflect the light, give a different dimension of artistic, approach to what you're seeing.
How do people receive your work? When you're sitting there watching people watching your work, do they talk to you? Do they come back? Are there mainly natives that talk back to you, Native Americans, or
Well,
everybody?
I'm invited by a friend of mine, Billy Wani, and I've been photographing him and his family for about 20 years. I've got so much respect for powwows and the energy and their beliefs and what they do. I use a telephoto lens, so half the time nobody knows I'm even shooting them. I mean, I can be across the arena. I've got a telephoto lens and I'm zeroing in on a piece of their regalia just because I do not want to intrude or interrupt.
Sacred ceremony.
Exactly. So I have a lot of respect for that. So unless it's, something that I feel that I have to approach somebody and be very close to them, 90% of the time I'm shooting natural events, how people are, going about the dance or preparing for it or laughing and having fun. It's
The whole ritual.
spontaneous.
Yeah.
And through that spontaneity, you get more feeling, more
Naturalness.
yes, out of a photograph, because a lot of things I shoot, if you look at it and you can't feel something for it, it's not a shot for me.
Lost the impact on it. Yeah.
Right.
I'm going to move over to Dan for a moment. Sorry to have ignored you.
No, that's fine.
Welcome to the show, Dan. Tell me about your painting. Well, where does it come from?
Like most painters, we paint our life, and that's what I do also. I was raised half in the city of Phoenix and half on the reservation at Hopi. And at Hopi, it's a very complex society of ceremony and integrated with your survival. Growing corn, squash, and beans and things. And I was brought up working very hard all the time. So, excuse me, I have formal training in painting, but I realized somewhere along the line that we, as Hopi people, we have a long history in painting, mainly mural painting. The anthropologists have discovered in our ceremonial chambers called kivas, very, very ancient full murals in the walls. So I take that imagery and I take that knowledge that I gained from my uncles and grandfather through the ceremonies and our lifeway to create things that I can give to the world, I guess. That's kind of what I do.
How does the process work for you? Do you see something? Do you feel something? Do you go into prayer? Do you go into ritual? Do you go into ceremony? Or can it happen through all of it?
It kind of happens all together, but I don't really go into ceremony, but I reflect that time, that feeling, and that's what I try and give through the paintings. I put my mind in a place where I remember what it is when I'm in fast or in ceremony.
Yeah.
The feeling.
I have friends that go to sweat lodges and they fast and they'll sit for 2 or 3 days in a fasting, and when they come out, they're filled with beautiful visions and communication that they want to share with other people. I've never done this, so Are you trying to bring this experience to the viewer?
Yes, I think so. It is a good thing. I mean, to give that feeling to someone else is, it's not like I'm trying to teach anybody anything. I'm just sharing.
How did you know you were an artist? You're sitting there, you're working as a young man. It sounds like you worked really hard, did some field work, were out there all the time. How did you find out you were an artist?
I really can't tell you. I drawn and painted all my life. I mean, ever since I can remember, I was doing something like that. And about the age of 16, it was done. I was going to be a painter, and that was it.
And what happened at 16? Where did you move into the direction of doing what you do to now?
Again, it's just this place that it was a kind of a conscious decision that was coming from something that I did not understand. And today I say more like it chose me more than I chose it. It's more of a calling.
Wow. So it has a lot of, almost a spiritual sense to you.
I if you want to call it that, yeah.
What do you want to call it?
It's just a
mystery?
A thing.
A thing. Wow. And Doug, how about you? How reflective is your native culture and what you do? How much of it does it paint your vision or your artwork? Or what do you want to say by bringing it into the new millennium? It sounds like that's what you've been able to do with the totems and different pieces of artwork.
Yeah, well, a lot of the paintings, I do a number of series all the time. But I went to our art schools, colleges for 7 years, ended up getting a master's degree. So I understand the mainstream art, but I draw all my imagery pretty much from, native artifact books, things like that, things I've experienced or researched. But I want to make a contemporary statement. But I think I touched on it before. I mean, you can look at something and maybe you can't tell what the meanings are of these pieces, but you get a sense that there is, something there. And if you do a little research, and a lot of people are actually, it's surprising, you do an opening like the college here, and how knowledgeable some people are. They can really get a lot out of it, and sometimes I learn from their observations what their interpretations are, and that's fun also.
Well, can I say that through artwork we keep the heritage alive, the cultural, the ritual. Some of the things you're photographing may cease to exist. Is this correct? Do you feel that?
Yeah, I believe, as a photographer, you basically are recording some type of history. And same thing as painting. And it's there for for the future, people in the present to learn from as well.
Dan, as an artist, what can you say, or in your lifetime as a Native American, the biggest misnomer about the culture is? I've seen exquisite everything, jewelry, beading, ritual, dance, family acceptance. What could you say one of the misnomers has been, and maybe you've helped to change that through your artwork?
Oh, I don't know about that, but it's just like I did the slide presentation last night, and there was a question, what do Hopis speak? Hopi. That, there is a lot of misnomers, but it's an educational process. We don't all live in teepees, and we don't all run on horses.
Absolutely. And I've seen vintage turquoise jewelry. My grandmother, who's Mexican, had actually bought some of it from the 1950s, early 50s, when it started to become very popular. So the artwork has always been there. Mm-hmm. And so this continued exposure has to be, hopefully, not that it may be the major goal of your work is to educate, but do you feel that you're able to put something out there for people that may be different if they had not been exposed to it?
I think, yes. As my work, I remember at the beginning, I was trying to portray the intellectual side of the creation. I mean, the abstract renderings of natural things, it takes intellect to create that thought or the concept, and according to history, we weren't supposed to be able to do that.
Right. Lots of people
So
were.
I made it a focus of mine to create imagery that said, "Look, this is what we do," and it takes a lot more than what you see on the surface. So yes, I guess I am in the process of educating in a way.
Doug, what does the future hold in store for you? Are you just going to continue moving in the same vein of artwork, or you'll move on to something shortly? Will you always stay in the native milieu, or there's other options?
Yeah, pushing it. I'm doing a show in Florence, Italy this coming April. And, well, there's a lot more exposure. You're talking about education, the way things used to be. With the opening of the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington. And there's a lot more shows like this one that are around the country. They can showcase the old work and the new work. Because you were talking, about things that had been done in the 50s, and there was a very small exposure and market in those days. Now it's all over the world, and Ralph Lauren this season, turquoise and all that. But there's a lot more places to expose the work that has been there and the new work that's inspired from the old. And
I mean, I know the Ralph Lauren movement with the feathers and the native inspiration. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And do you think people are finally opening it up?
It gives more exposure and appreciation, so it's good. I mean, people like what Ralph wants to sell them, and they have a lot of respect for that when they pay those prices. And there's overflow or connections because of things like that. It's more acceptance, and people, you get a bigger audience, and so it's always changing.
George, in your quest to take these still photographs and connect, have you connected with your native roots in some way, or are you still working on it?
I believe I have. I'm still working on it. I've have probably thousands of images. I've been shooting powwows for 20, 25 years. Wow. And each one to me is actually special. Any that I can get out there for people to interpret, or an exposure of what we are trying to approach and achieve through painting, sculpturing. I think it's great because, too much exposure or exposure period is better than none at all.
But have you been able to identify with your culture?
Yes,
Do you have a newfound education and respect? Are you still trying to find those roots?
Well, I'll always be in the process of finding it. Being exposed to more Native American artists has been very great for me, because I'm seeing other aspects and learning more about it. So I feel that I'm still pursuing.
Dan, what do you hope your artwork tells people when you're doing it? To me, it's a new medium that really hasn't been fully fleshed out on any level, Native American artwork. It's always been with us. It's always been part of the culture for thousands of years. And maybe right now it's the precipice to opening up to the new millennium, and then some. What would you hope your artwork says to a person who's never seen Native culture, doesn't know much about it?
It's kind of hard to say, but it's a good feeling. That's all I'm asking for, and let me participate in this, to paint and show with anyone. Actually, it doesn't have to be Native American, but it's just something that like I said, it's a calling, so that's what I do.
You're the vehicle?
Yeah, I'm the vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just to bring joy or happiness or good feeling.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to wrap up the show by giving each one of you an opportunity to talk about anything you'd like to end the show with. If I missed anything that you're doing in the future or would like to say about this show in particular or the culture.
Well, it's fun to be part of this group and be able to, have a chance to, maybe somebody out there listening, watching, will be curious, go see the show and get something out of it they hadn't understood before. And I guess that's the point of putting out the effort to make these things happen. Somebody out there relates to it usually, and and they remember it and they're happy they put out the effort.
How does it feel working with other Native American artists? Having that camaraderie, how does that feel for you instead of going solo or maybe always doing your own shows?
Well, yeah, I get both of that. I do one-man shows. The last one was in Santa Fe. But listening to Dan's, listening to these guys talk right now, I learned something from that, and it's contributes to the energy to make it all go forward. You know, and we're all doing our part the best we can, and it makes a difference.
And what about you, George? Do you have any last words you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I just feel privileged that there are shows like that, you know, helping to educate more people about cultural events, because we seem to be drifting a little further apart from that. But the camaraderie, the views of other artists, you can't help but grow from that. And I feel pretty privileged to be in the present company of some pretty famous international artists, and it gives me incentive to pursue, you know, and to look into my field as well, as deep as they have, you know.
To keep going?
Yes.
You're going to still keep shooting powwows?
Yeah.
You're not done?
No, not yet. Not quite.
Is there an ultimate photograph that's waiting to be born, or do you figure every photograph you take is an ultimate experience for you in the moment?
Well, they keep getting better. I keep focusing in more towards knowing my ultimate goal, and collaboration on photography, getting photography more towards painting, because a lot of people have a negative aspect of photographs you really can't sell because it's not a really true art medium.
Right.
So my
biased.
next process is to, you know, put them on canvas, pump them up a little bit so
Wow.
they look like paintings. And then, what are you going to say?
Yeah, you've covered yourself.
That's right.
Dan, any parting words from you about the exhibit and your participation, and anything you'd like to tell the audience about it?
Well, what they said.
Great, they brought me a shy, humble, lovely artist who's...
It is a special thing to be able to have the camaraderie and do group exhibitions, and we always do teach each other something. I mean, I'm coming away with a lot of new information that I can use, you know. Like Doug, I do solo exhibitions, and I've been very, very lucky to have been able to travel a little bit into Europe and do some shows there, and I want to do more. It's a sharing. That's actually what I was brought up with at Hopi. It's a sharing of feeling and being human.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing everything with me today, your artwork, your knowledge, your laughs. We had a good time before the show started. Trust me, it's the Three Stooges right here all over again. And we'd like to thank HCC for having the art show. Please come out and see it. And thank you for joining us for Outreach Programming.